All right, let's just get this show on the road. Welcome, everyone. I am Rebecca Bryant, and I'm Vice President for Strategic Engagement with Trinka. And I am happy to join you in discussion and presentation related to proactive strategies for addressing the ethical challenges of AI use in higher education. So again, I'm Rebecca Bryant. I have recently joined Trinka. I've had a background working in academic affairs at a large public research university, as well as working as a scholar and researcher on behalf of libraries, and also spending a couple years with scholarly infrastructure with ORCID. So I'm really happy to be with you today. I'm also going to ask my co-presenter, Rachel, to introduce herself now, and I believe they're going to put her on the screen now. There you are, Rachel. We can see you. But we can't, great, and we can hear you. Great.
My name is Rachel Rice Albright. I am the Book Sciences Librarian at Kentucky University. Prior to this, I was a graduate student at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where I focused in biosciences and medical information management. Outside of library work, I also did a stint in the gene therapy industry for an internship where I worked in data, a little bit of data analytics and a little bit of patient advocacy. And it's been wonderful being in education and working with students. And I'm so excited to meet you guys here today.
Okay. I'm going to talk for the first 15 minutes or so, provide some, I think, grounding sort of information. And then we're going to have some discussion with Rachel, and I hope with all of you as well, because we're really interested in what things look like on the ground for all of you. So let's start. No surprise, students are using AI. Most students are using AI. A recent survey on student generative AI of 1,041 full-time students in the UK showed that 92% of students are using AI in one form or another, and most students are using AI to write, improve, and summarize text. So far, I probably haven't told you anything you don't already know. 88% of them in that survey said they're also using AI for assessments like exams and essays. So you can see right off the bat where we're going with this, concerns about engagement as well as academic integrity. The main reason that students say that they're using AI is really to save time as well as to make their work better so they can probably get better grades. So that's there. This quote's really intriguing to me because this quote is from an article in New York Magazine that probably some of you read earlier in May, but they interviewed this student who said, college is just how well I can use ChatGPT at this point. It's less about how well I can write an essay, how well I can study. It's really about, oh, I just need to be a really good prompter. So things that I think we should maybe have some concern about. And particularly, I think, we need to be thoughtful about what are the impacts on learning. Now, I was at EDUCAUSE last week, and there is a lot of actually really exciting technology that can support student learning. And I think there are a lot of opportunities. I think we want to be really excited about that. It supports personalized learning. It can do sort of Socratic method tutoring. It can be a really great guide. There's a lot of things happening, both homegrown and in the product space. But what I noticed also at EDUCAUSE is there was a lot of hype. It was really about 95% about this issue, and then only about 5% on, there also are challenges in this space. And some of those challenges relate to cognitive offloading and other things. So I'm going to take a look at my notes here and just give you a little rundown on this. Cognitive offloading is really the practice of using external tools to reduce the mental effort required for a task. So for me, a big cognitive offloading is my use of a cell phone for remembering telephones, numbers, like, or not remembering telephone numbers. So this isn't always a bad thing. This means that, you're freeing up your memory in some ways, but it can lead to dependency. And in educational context, cognitive offloading can make learning easier, but may risk them not engaging deeply enough to learn. All right, I have more notes now, but I can't get to them. Shoot. All right, I would know how to do this on a Mac. Okay, metacognitive laziness is really where the student is, where we're really just not engaging. We're just, really letting the technology sort of turning over our engagement in that way. And that can also lead to increasing automation bias. And that's really where you have increasing confidence in the tool that you're using, and you may be increasingly using that tool, often to the point where, the more confidence you have, often the more likely you are to have reduced reflection, to have less engagement, and ultimately have sort of poorer memory development. So there is some research. I want to emphasize that the research is new, ongoing, and sometimes quite hard because AI is embedded in a lot of things. I want to point you to a study by MIT. It was called Your Brain on ChatGPT. It got a lot of press. You may have seen this. But basically, what they did with this study was they took students, MIT students, they put them in 3 groups. One group wrote with the support of ChatGPT. One group wrote with the support of Google. They had access to the internet. And one group wrote an SAT type essay without any additional support. And what they found was that the students who wrote with ChatGPT remembered less. And then when they were asked to write again, or to write again about what they had written about and recall it, they couldn't really remember what they'd written about. And of course, the greatest recall was from the students who had not even used the internet. But then as they sort of asked them to write other things, they grew more dependent on using ChatGPT. So they became less engaged, and they were just more likely, as they continued to sort of iterate on this, to just cut and paste. So again, these are early studies, but this is indicative of some of the concerns we should have about students' cognition. Similarly, Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon did a study that found really an increased tendency of students to offload mental effort as their confidence, their automation bias increased. And I think that's something we can expect as LLMs are more used, we use them more, and they continue to improve. I think we're going to see more of that automation bias. Oh, okay. So that's some of the evidence. You know this, you're on your campuses. In a survey from the American Association of Colleges and Universities, we know that 66% of senior academic leaders think that Gen AI will diminish their students' attention spans. And we also know from a faculty survey from the Digital Education Council in the UK that 83% of faculty in a global survey expressed concern about their students' ability to critically evaluate. So we have data, we also have anecdotal sort of concerns. And I appreciated this quote from a learning expert at Santa Clara University who says, we're really talking about an entire generation of learning that is perhaps significantly undermined here. It's short-circuiting the learning process, and it's happening fast. And I think one of the things that's really important for us, this is happening fast. This is urgent. What is the issue for the students who are learning right now? And what are their futures going to look like versus 4 years from now when we've had more time to adapt? So, learning, academic integrity. Lots of impacts here. Again, that AAC&U study, 66% of senior academic leaders say cheating has increased on their campus. When I did a little sort of, Google investigation, like in student newspapers or something, I found, of course, this is also being reported on our campuses. One institution reported a 400% increase in academic integrity cases through their student affairs unit. So we are seeing this. There is evidence of more academic integrity violations that are being reported. Probably lots aren't being reported. And also in another survey of 733 undergraduates, those researchers found that 41% of the students had used AI in ways that were explicitly prohibited by their instructors. So if you're a faculty member, this is probably no surprise to you. I've talked with a lot of faculty members and they're like, yeah. So what are institutions doing? One of the things they may be looking at are AI content detectors, which may seem like something that could be really useful. The challenge is we see students who are trying to sort of game this. They're using AI humanizers. They're doing this round tripping where they're putting the text that they've got from ChatGPT through Claude, through other things, so that it can start to seem more human, so it doesn't seem so generated. It might confuse the AI content detector. They also may use prompts. So can you make my grammar less good? Can you introduce some spelling errors to make it seem more like a student work? All of those things are happening. And I don't want to assert that all students are doing this, but we do have a significant subset of students who are probably doing this. Um, Academic leaders say their faculty aren't, you can't just look at it and always be sure that it's AI. And I think that's getting harder. And there are AI content detectors. There's been a lot about this in the news. I've seen stuff in the Washington Post, and I think the Atlantic, definitely in the New York Times, about really alarmingly high false positive rates. That can be up to 10%. And part of what I get really concerned about here is that ESL students have 2 to 3 times more likely to experience false flags. And it's part because their vocabulary, they're learning. They're more likely to say big versus huge or enormous. So is ChatGPT. So that is also a real bias issue for us. We've seen cases where students have been falsely accused. I talked with a student last week at a conference who said, yeah, I'd been falsely accused. I ended up crying in front of my professor. But we also see legal implications. We see students like in medical school are falsely accused because of AI detectors who then end up suing the institution, which is not good for anybody, including institutional reputation. And also, it's just really a surveillance culture. I mean, I don't think this is necessarily the way we want to address this problem with students. Students often report they feel like the campus is out to get them. So AI is here. Change is coming. Again, 48% of college leaders believe that the teaching model at their institution is likely to change significantly. These numbers are about a year old. I would guess that they're higher now. Leaders at larger schools expect more change. And 64% of faculty, again from this other faculty survey, believe that AI will bring significant to transformative change in the role of instructors. And it's interesting is that fewer than 10% expected little to no change for instructors. So most people think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to adapt my classes, my assessments, etc. And here's another interesting quote, this time from a leader in technology education at UNESCO, who says, the rate of adoption of various generative AI tools by students and faculty worldwide has been accelerating too fast for institutional policies, pedagogies, and ethics to keep up. And I think that pretty much summarizes where we are. So I'm going to ask this, and then folks in the back, we're going to put Rachel on after I introduce this question. So my question for us to discuss, for Rachel to respond to, and for us to discuss together is how do we think institutions should be addressing AI generated content? And some other things just to prompt your thinking here is, are institutions responding to student AI use of AI in coursework at an institutional level, at a course level? What are you seeing? Does it seem urgent? Does your institution think it's urgent? And really, what is happening? Does your campus have a policy, et cetera? So with that, I'm going to pull this off and ask that we see Rachel. There she is. And so, Rachel, I'm going to ask you to share some of the thoughts that you've had as you've reflected on this.
So, to start, I think that faculty and universities, especially university administration, needs to be honest with how we are also party to students' levels of stress and how they choose to interact with process of gaining knowledge. I view AI and academic integrity as kind of a spiritual stress test for what higher education is. These academic integrity is not a new issue. It's more widespread because, not everybody initially was able to post writing their thesis on Upwork and pay $30,000 to have a postgrad, write that for them. But so now anybody pretty much can get something at least halfway decent that they can feel comfortable uploading to their professors. And in all honesty, from my perspective, I can hardly blame students simply because it just makes good business sense to operate as efficiently as possible and to approach issues, especially ones where, maybe they aren't as confident, in a way that minimizes the amount of exposure that they, or maybe a better way to put it would be reveal less of themselves in their through their work to their professor and their classmates. EKU, and I'm speaking purely as Rachel Ripe Albright. I can't speak for EKU. I can say that we are constantly looking at our AI policy. We put a new draft forward in last month, actually, it was a week from today. And we listed that, it was going to be up to the professor how they want their students to interact with AI and utilize AI. And of course, professors are also feeling vulnerable and unsure. And so I think right now we have a lot of folks operating in unfamiliar territory. People feel threatened by the new technology in some cases, and that's never a good place to be if you can't move confidently to navigate change.
All right.
And I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. So I want to hear if anybody here in the audience has any thoughts sort of related to that. And again, the question really is, how do you think institutions should be responding, or if you have any information about how your institution is responding or your library? And you don't all have to talk at once.
So my institution is about to start their 5-year quality enhancement plan for SACs. And for those of you who know what that is, you know what a headache that is. As we're looking at topics right now, AI and tech is rising to the top for us to focus on that, just that, for 5 years. Holy cow.
You're on the
So I'm not a librarian, but I was recently working with my son has recently done his applications for university, and so he was showing me his Common App essay, and so on, and he had a really good idea, I thought, and his first draft was very rough, and I gave him a lot of feedback on it, and then he went to ChatGPT and made it, from my point of view, and I'm guessing from the point of view of admissions readers, significantly worse. It's polished, as AI also is, but it was very sort of vacuous in the way that AI often is. And because I had time, we went back and forth, and then he'd make progress, and there would be like a paragraph, and he'd go back to AI again. And I think, to people of my, who look at writing a lot, and, my age, we can see it, but I think he couldn't really see it very well. But he did, I think, learn from this whole experience that every time he used AI, it set us back because he had to start again because it's, no. So then the other example is I looked at my nephew's Common App essay. He sent me a draft and I read through it and I thought, okay, well, this is very ChatGPT dominated. So I isolated about 13 to 15 phrases. I said, these are ChatGPT. No, I didn't say that. I said, I think that people might be concerned. And then he wrote back to me and said, oh yeah, I think I over polished it first time, so I'm going to introduce some imperfections. So he sent it back to me. It didn't seem particularly less AI, and there were like some incomplete sentences and so on. And what can you do? He's not my brother's kid, my brother's problem. But I guess what I learned from that is that I think it is possible to get through to kids and tell them that actually you think this is saving you time, but if you're trying to meet the standard, it's really going to set you back. But it's just an incredibly labor-intensive thing. It's nothing a teacher would have time to do for 50 kids. So.
Yeah, and I have a couple of responses to what you just said. One is your son and your nephew have the benefit of an informed parent who is guiding them, which is not true for probably the majority of students who are in admissions or even in college. So there's one thing, is that they've gotten great guidance from you, but that's not probably not the norm. And then the other point is just admissions. We're talking mostly today about student engagement in classes once they've been admitted. But of course, this is everywhere. This is also in this process. I appreciate you bringing that up. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, well, let's move on a little bit here. I have a few comments here also about how institutions are responding. One of the things we know is that faculty want more guidance. Again, drawing from some of these surveys that I've read, 57% of educators do see AI as a strategic priority. I mean, I think that we understand that students are entering an AI world, but they report feeling completely ill-equipped to address the implications. This is happening so fast, they don't feel like they have the tools. 80% of faculty do not find their institutional AI guidance sufficient. And then, additionally, 80% feel there's a lack of clarity on how AI can be applied in teaching. They really feel like they're sort of having to deal with this on their own. And only 6% of faculty in this faculty survey, the one from the Digital Education Council in the UK, said that thinks that their institution has clearly outlined how AI can be used in teaching. So these numbers, show that we're responding really slowly, that we have a long way to go. But also, I think there's just, some challenges really for our faculty. They feel unsupported. Oversight for academic integrity has been largely left to the individual instructors. 71%, I think, is the number. A majority of institutions still lack any kind of AI-related acceptable use policies. So there's just also a lot of nebulousness about what is acceptable. It's really kind of course by course. And to some extent, that needs to happen, but that can actually also add a lot of confusions for our students. Each course may have a different AI policy. That's something students have to keep track of. And because there aren't clear guidelines, especially coming at the institutional level, they may be using, kind of like your example, Adam, they may be using AI in ways they don't even realize are inappropriate because they're young, they're learning, right? So, and I love this quote, and I bring this up. This is an AI learning expert from the University of Mississippi who points out, we may have a freshman student taking 5 classes and they'll be exposed to 5 different AI policies. I appreciate that he mentions freshmen because our freshmen are at risk of not being retained. If we can't keep them in freshmen, then that's gone. Their life may never be as wealthy and fruitful and stable without that. And also our institutions, there's also lost tuition revenue, which I don't think is the most important point, but it's worth mentioning. So I do think we are adding an additional challenge to retention, particularly for students who are at risk. So we need to be really thoughtful about this. So let's also talk a little bit about ensuring academic rigor and integrity. So we sort of talked about, faculty need to adjust, how they're teaching, but they also really need to be thinking about how they assess the students' performance, how they give grades. So again, 50% of faculty members believe that the current assignments they've been giving, the ones they've been maybe doing for years, must be redesigned to be more resistant to AI misuse. Again, I think that number is probably higher. We're going to see maybe more survey data early next year. We'll see if it looks different. I think it's going to grow. 54% of faculty believe that current student evaluation methods require significant changes. So, and 13% call for an urgent revamp. I don't have any data on how this breaks down by discipline. I would guess that the humanities is probably largely that urgent revamp. I'm right there with them. So, but of course, we all want our students to also sort of be AI ready. We know they're going to use it in the workforce. We are using it in the workforce. And so there are appropriate reasons for faculty to say, yes, you can use AI in this class, depending upon the class. So we know that 57% of faculty have been allowing students to use AI. But one of the things that's really important is they want them to use it with disclosure. And what Adam is reporting in that admissions essay is there's no disclosure. And I think that's probably the default. I think it's a really hard thing to, have for the workflow and just sort of to train students to do. It's also, if it's not detectable, then there's that too. But about a quarter also don't allow AI in assignments. I suspect we're always going to see this. I think it's appropriate for freshman rhetoric to not allow AI if you're trying to teach people how to be good writers, right? There are classes where I think this is going to be appropriate. And I think that we need to understand that there's a whole range of how this may work. It's always going to be a little confusing at the course level, but I think we can add more stability with some improved campus policies. So here is the study of that higher education student generative AI survey from the UK. Josh Freeman says, every assessment must be reviewed in case it can be completed easily using AI, such as an admissions essay. Institutions will not solve any of these problems alone. They should seek to share best practices with each other. And that's, in a way, a little bit of what we're doing here today. Ultimately, AI tools should be harnessed to advance learning rather than inhibit it. So there are ways, there are ways that we can support student learning with technology. There are also ways that it's diminishing student learning. Faculty are scrambling. Everything has to be sort of reassessed. Writing is particularly challenging. And if you're reading, this pops up in the New York Times like about once a month, but you see faculty members saying, okay, I'm not going to let my students write their essays anymore on a computer. They're going to come in class. We're going to ask them to write it in class in a blue book. Okay. Or I'm going to test my students with oral exams. All right. I think that these are part of the toolkit. That's great. But the problem is we didn't always teach all these students cursive. It's also short form. It's how much you can write usually in about 45 minutes. Oral exams, these things don't scale. You're a big public institution, this isn't going to work. And so, we often then have people who think now that, and I'm quoting actually from a Chronicle of Higher Education opinion piece. It was written by Professor Matthew Brophy, professor of philosophy at High Point University. This was about 2 weeks ago. And it was just so interesting because he really shared how he was teaching, but he also really says, at this point, take-home essays are educational malpractice. He thinks that it's educationally indefensible for us to assign take-home essays because we know that they're largely going to be written by ChatGPT. And that's not his goal in teaching students to think in a philosophy class. And he also says, look, we can't just go to blue books. It is still so pedagogically essential to have longer form essays, to have students write 20-page essays, to do that type of thinking. And I'm trained as a music historian. That training in history requires that sort of practice. And I would also argue that it's part of the training of your mind, that if we're moving into an AI world, we need people equipped with higher level skills because AI is doing all the lower stuff. It is more important than ever that we are equipping people with critical thinking skills. It is so essential. So I am really also agree with Matthew about the long form essay. It can't go away. He also says our standard should be upholding academic integrity while upholding student learning. And I think he asserts that this can be done. And again, I was at EDUCAUSE last week. I consistently heard this from education technologists, is we are observing, because of an AI, a shift from product to process. So it used to be student submits the paper and then you grade it. But increasingly, it's really about looking at how the student did the paper. What is the process of doing the paper? So he specifically talks about we need to document, we need to verify the writing process, collect version history, affirm writing is iterative and evolving. He described how he does this with Google Docs. He has every student submit their Google Doc with the revision history and, but it's a pretty cumbersome process, right? And he can only do this because he's at a small liberal arts college. He also says we need more ownership through reflection. He asks students to explain their writing decisions, right? Why did you do this? And then also, I used AI for research for this, or this was partly written by that. They need to verify that. He wants that disclosure. He also says it's really valuable now to break this process down into smaller things that he can grade: proposals, drafts, revisions. It's a little bit more suited to um, ensuring that students aren't using AI throughout the process. But at the same time, he says AI is here. We can't ignore it, but we do need to find ways that we can help direct the student learning process. And again, I'm with Trinka. We have a product called DocuMark, and it's an academic integrity solution that's really designed to support student writing while guiding them to do responsible AI. It provides transparency and maintains a real sort of human in the loop, both for the student and the faculty member. And the goal is to shift that writing assessment process from product to process. And what was really also kind of exciting for me in reading Matthew's op-ed was the things he described were also the things that we do. So we also document the writing process, and we understand, document how the content was created, where the sources were, what the prompts were used, if they're also using AI within it, which is optional. We guide students when they cut and paste something, for instance, to prompt them to revise or verify that AI content. So that's also something we're seeing that faculty are asking. We want you to verify that. And so that's really a guide to help students to reflect, to think more about responsible AI. And part of also what's useful, what Matthew's trying to get out of his Google Doc, which he's collecting from every single student and it's separate, is that writing pattern analytics. So part of what that means is if you're typing something in from ChatGPT, it's, just sort of typing it, it goes in, but that's not the way we write. When we write, we think, we stop, we pause, we backspace, we fix that spelling we did, we go back, we wordsmith it. That's really easy to see in DocuMark, and that's all documented. And then that is when the student submits the assignment, it's seamlessly reported to the faculty, available in a dashboard, whole class, and it's provided with sort of an engagement metric. This metric doesn't tell you everything, but it is a really good place to start for faculty to thinking about, oh, okay, I want to look at this one more closely. This engagement score's not where I want it to be, and maybe send it back to the student. Okay, that score is also transparent to the student, as it should be. So that's a little bit about DocuMark. FYI, I got some team members here in the back. If you want to know more information, I also have a QR code at the end you can take a picture of for a virtual, and we're happy to also talk with your institution, do a demo, whatever. All right, we're going to come back to Rachel now after I pose this question. Thanks, Rachel. Let me pose the question here is, how are we teaching responsible AI to our students? And how should we be teaching responsible AI to our students? And I think especially for Rachel, what's the role of the library within this? So I'm going to turn over to you, Rachel.
From my perspective, and I know we all love black and white rules and policy, but as somebody who works with predominantly first-gen students, I work with a lot of students of color. I work with students who are non-trads, and the blanket prescriptive approaches can do more damage than good. And so we think about, where are the gaps that our students need to bridge before they can even be in a place to learn. We get them healthy. We get them with tech that can serve them. And then we can start catching them up to speed in the classroom. And what this means is, something that works for a student that is really high performing. Maybe they're in the honors program. Maybe they're one of our students that had a parent go through higher education. They are prepared to interact with AI in a very different way than a student who is already on campus. They maybe have already messed with ChatGPT some, and what they know for sure is if they weren't a strong performing student in high school, they know that sub-performance will not do them any favors, and they want to avoid as much embarrassment and um, and discomfort as possible. And that's entirely valid. And we as instructors, me as a librarian, I'm a teaching and learning librarian. I'm in front of classes a lot. I was in front of a class of high school kids this morning. So I hope that you guys are enjoying this, because I think with the high schoolers, it's always a toss up when I talk to them whether or not they have fun. But these guys, I think they did. But we bring in AI where we can. I try to bring in, assess student comfort level. And I ask them if they're using it. Inevitably, it's like 50-50 yes, 50% no. And they're probably lying because, they feel like using this is shameful in a way. And I get the sense that some students want to use their own abilities, but aren't confident in them. And I worry as an instructor and as a research librarian that this isn't going to do them any favors. When I run a research appointment, we do get to ChatGPT or some of the other more specialized research tools, but that's not where I start them. But I don't start them on Google, and I don't start them in a library database either. I start with a student. They bring me an assignment. They put it in front of me. I push the assignment out of the way, and I ask them, what do you want to do when you grow up? Why are you here? What in your life led you to want to be a nursing student at Eastern Kentucky University? And that's when they think, oh, okay, well, I had a family member who was sick. And so we start talking about that, and I try to plug them in to research that, they care about, because in every single assignment, I think it's room for passion. And that is the saving grace for education. It should be, every assignment should be an opportunity for a student to move closer and closer to the work that they want to do and the person that they want to be. And AI can be a tool to help in those situations. But before we can be an AI-ready institution or classroom, we have to be a classroom and an institution that knows how to nurture students and bring them closer to their goals in a holistic way.
Thanks, Rachel. I also want to say thank you. It is so hard to present as a virtual panelist when you can't see anybody. So I just want to recognize that. So anybody else here, not librarian, I'm eager to hear from all of you with thoughts about how we should be teaching this, how we are teaching this, what's the role of the library, what are we doing, what are we not doing, and any thoughts? I'll just kind of throw that out pretty openly. Yes.
Behavioral science librarian at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So I think for librarians, based on my experience with the instruction and research consultation and reference, those from and practice experience, and I know it's important to care our students or patrons as a human being and how they grow. I echo with Rachel who says, and come back to the end, like, what that really mean for you? Like we know that in the research consultation or those conversations, it's important to clarify research question. And then for the first year and the second year students, sometimes they have problem figuring that out. If you go back to say why you want to study this, then they will much better, easier for them to reformulate their questions that they truly care as a human being. They build a relationship connection between their between their research question and them as a human being, and that they care about that research project more, and then put more effort in. The barriers can in the process can drop more. So as a librarian, I feel when I talking to students on the AI, I think bring back to them as a human being and what this AI means, your relationship with AI and awareness of different AI tools in the research project in terms of research question, how they contribute. Where are you in this process, in this project process and cycle? So I think that's very important so the students can have the clear awareness of the or navigating the relationship between themselves and the AI. So I always kind of wanted to put the student into their build the awareness of relationship.
Thank you. One of the things I'm hearing is that we always still need humans in the loop. There's still a real important role for us defining how this works and still supporting our students and also assessing kind of where they are, what their main challenges are. Anyone else have comments? Oh yeah.
So when you mentioned the surveillance culture, so you mentioned that the erosion, the trust between the faculty and students because it's very based on the output of their writing or project, right? But if the AI what's the product? Document and now surveillance, the whole process. So what does that put on how that impact the user's psychological well-being and the trust?
I think that's a very good question. What I'll say to that is that I think that our intention is for this to be transparency and guidance rather than surveillance. So we don't want to just detect and say, oh, you used AI, bad you failed the course. I think what's different here is that it is using information that we learn about the students to also offer prompts to guide them in AI. And I think the way that you actually need to understand the writing process, which I understand may look like surveillance to some people, but also to understand that in order to prompt them to use responsible AI. And sometimes even to point out to them, hey, this isn't really how you're supposed to be doing that. And those are sort of the guiding things that can be possible. Other questions? Yes.
Okay, so hypothetical here. I have my doctor in Mobile, Alabama, University of South Alabama, and she was telling me a story about her daughter who is a freshman at a small liberal arts school in Virginia. And she's a strong writer. She had a strong experience with writing. She's terrified to use AI. And the faculty apparently is also terrified of AI. And he thought the paper was so well written that he accused her. He brought her in and said, "Did you use AI to write this paper? I feel like you did." And she had not and was in tears. And so I'm wondering about the what is it, the DocuMark? Could that happen? How do we a cautionary tale, if you will?
Yeah. Actually, it solves that problem. Yeah, because if you're analyzing the student's writing and you can see, any writer does those sorts of things. You backspace, as you write, you pause, you think, you go back, you edit that sentence. You're not doing that when you're using ChatGPT in the same way. So I think, again, it sort of comes back to transparency about, those AI detectors. You can have you can be falsely accused. You can be falsely accused without one. We know that happens. But I do think that having more evidence of the process in ways that technology can help support that could have maybe prevented that person from being falsely accused. It's a really good point. I appreciate hypothetical because I hadn't actually thought through it that way. That's good. Thank you.
Can I add something, actually?
Please.
We recently had a student here in our writing studio. Our library partners really closely with the writing studio at EPU, of course. And she is a international student, and she is an example of a student who is a much stronger English writer than she is an English speaker. So she's been, I think, falsely accused 3 times by 3 different professors over the past year, and has brought it to the attention of the writing studio. So fortunately, they go to bat for her. And I worry about students like that, because someone who is already stressed out, you know, it's just one more thing that you really don't need, right? Because to be perfectly frank with all of you here, right now, academic integrity as it applies to AI is like so not an issue for me right now, because I have student employees who don't have food stamps any longer, and we have to figure out how to help them continue to eat and make their rent. So, you know, you compound that, and it's like, can we even really blame the students for, you know, maybe not prioritizing, you know, how perfectly they're progressing through their degrees? And that's where we need to step in as faculty and administrators, and honestly as mentors, because I think anybody who works in education in whatever capacity, you are a mentor for students, and you are a mentor for younger colleagues. And so it's up to you to offer them a way forward that that they can be proud of, and that they can, you know, move forward with the same empathy that you've shown them. And so that's part of the reason false positives really, really do bother me.
I particularly appreciate your point of view, because I know that many of us here, in my previous experience was at an elite public institution, but there are so many of our institutions, Eastern, community college, where the populations are struggling with some basic life challenges. My husband was a community college professor and would come home almost daily with tales that I almost couldn't believe that people were dealing with, losing family members and shootings in Chicago and etc. All sorts of grief, and those are the students who we almost most of all want to be successful. And so I do think we have a responsibility to make as many things smooth so that we can help launch them. So we're getting close to the end. I have another quote for you here. This is from a scholar at Harvard University who says, AI can do your homework for you and prevent you from thinking, or it can help you think better. And I definitely agree with that. So the real question is, are we using AI in education in a way that encourages critical thinking and that promotes learning? So I think it's really about, can we focus on how we can provide the tools and the support, both human and technological, to help students with this transition? And of course, there's all the needs to support faculty with this transition again, but I'm really student focused on this. We need to support their learning. And again, I am so concerned because I really do think that students need higher order critical thinking and problem solving skills in the new environment more than ever before, because they don't have to, and they aren't going to have as much capacity to learn some of those things in the way by doing a lot of the rote things that we did earlier in our careers that helped us get there. So it's so important that we prioritize learning to amplify that. All right, this is our last question, and we're going to come back to Rachel, because I want to, and actually she set us up well, because there are implications for equity, bias, and opportunity for students. We talked a little bit about implications for ESL students with AI detectors, but there's some other issues, and it's something that I found Rachel particularly articulate about, particularly I think from your point of view coming from the type of institution that Eastern Kentucky is, where the students are usually first generation, et cetera. So I welcome your thoughts, and then we can have a little bit of time for discussion. I know we have about 10 minutes left. Take it away, Rachel.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to be a cool and collected, level-headed academic, but I take a lot of pride in my students, and I take a lot of pride in my own career. And the reason that I took this job was because it was absolutely my dream job, because I am taking care of myself from 13 years ago. So I know their struggles, because they were my struggles. And I empathize with them because I know how hard it is to come in when everyone around you has had a better education, or everyone around you is smarter. I spend a lot of my time actually convincing students that smart and dumb are as subjective and damaging as, pretty versus ugly, simply because we are all multifaceted people. And I tell my ESL students that, I understand that you are self-conscious about how strong your English is when you're talking to me, but I want you to know that you are absolutely brilliant for being able to do this. Especially students, it's fashionable if you are a middle class or wealthy white person to be bilingual. If you're a first generation Hispanic girl in higher ed, then great job. You get to also speak English on top of your other less cool language that you may not want to rely on all the time. And part of my issue with how we're uptaking AI is, in some respects, I think we have blinders on, because we know that there are equity issues. We know that the training data is lacking. I think that there are steps that are being taken to rectify that. But if I have a student who speaks the way I speak when I'm not on this call, they're using non-standard English. We've got our ain'ts, we've got our yonders, and if they upload that to ChatGPT, since it's an average, they're going to ask that student to remove that, which is in a lot of ways, removing that student's identity. It's the same concept as to, you got a student from New Orleans, they're going to say who that is instead of who is that. And that is a totally valid way to talk and communicate and write. And academia, as it stands, in my opinion, has a very homogenizing culture that we are fight against, but don't really win against, where we try to make our students as marketable and ready to go out and be successful as we can. But I think we lose a lot of that. And my concern with AI and not implementing it in a holistic manner is that we are going to make that worse. And that is not what I want for my students, because I need them. Their communities need them. Education and scholarship needs them, because they can think in ways that and consider problems from directions that other people can't, because they didn't grow up in the hills of Kentucky with a daddy with black lung. There's certain things that averages can't capture. And I don't want my students to be average anyway, because they're not average. They're phenomenal. Just like all students have to be phenomenal.
Thanks, Rachel. We're going to go back to my slide now. So this summarizes, I think, a few of the things that Rachel said. Is that, I reported about the bias in AI detection. My second bullet here is about first gen Black and neurodiverse students. We don't necessarily have evidence of greater bias in AI detection, just of general bias in general, that they're more likely to be accused of cheating. So these are all concerns for us in thinking about this. But also there are inequities. Many of your institutions may be coming into an agreement with OpenAI to support premium access to that tool. You're probably a fairly elite institution. If you're a community college, sorry. There are also those inequities, just as they always are just continuing with AI, with access. And people, do people also have, same high-speed internet, all those things that were already problems. But also, of course, as Rachel mentioned, there are the concerns that we all have about the bias in the training data and the harm that this can also cause. So we're at 2:11. Does anybody want to make a comment on any of that? But I'm going to otherwise wrap us up.